Okay, thank you all for coming back, and I hope you've been looking forward to this almost final event of our 2 days of celebrating this long partnership, and that is a sort of a closing lecture by somebody that needs no introduction, probably to those of you from Milan or those of you here at Notre Dame, but I will give a very short one. One that focuses first on the fact that Dr. Lou Jordan, who worked in the Hesburgh Libraries for 41 years, retiring as associate librarian, or associate university librarian just a few years ago, was, before all of that, a student in the Medieval Institute and received his PhD some years ago, a few years ago, as one of our many fine doctoral students in medieval studies. It's a great pleasure to have him with us and to have him fill in the sandwich that Don Federico gave us the bread for yesterday. Here is Dr. Lou Jordan and the meat.
Thank you. I originally was just going to give a few stories, but then Julia said, no, you really have to give a history of the projects, and I said, okay, we'll do that. And so this is kind of a history of the project, but it's from a personal viewpoint. It's obviously the things that I knew and I worked on. And I don't have any slides, it's a straight history. But then I'll be followed by Randy, who has been here as long as I have just about, and is going to give some slides and do a personal viewpoint from your side, which will be great. I'm waiting to hear that one too. But a lot of names, a lot of things that Randy will remember, and some of you may as well. During the 1960s and early 70s, the determined efforts of Prefect Angelo Paredi and his staff at the Ambrosiana, along with the coordination of his colleague and close friend, Astrid Gabriel, who's director of the Medieval Institute at Notre Dame. And by the way, medieval was M-E-D-I-A-E-V-A-L, until Russell came.
I didn't know that.
Yes, you would have known it if you were here. They brought the plans of Cardinal Montini and Theodore Hesburgh to fruition. So they really did a lot of work over that period. The first Ambrosiana microfilms arrived at Notre Dame in May of 1963. Over the next decade, the Ambrosiana staff microfilmed 12,000 manuscripts and sent both the original negative and positive microfilm reels to Notre Dame. This included Latin, Greek, Arabic, Hebrew, and Western vernacular language manuscripts from the medieval and Renaissance eras, with the exception of the fragile palimpsests. A few of Ambrosiana's significant collections of early modern manuscripts were included, such as the Borromeo correspondence. But for the most part, the extensive collections of early modern paper manuscripts were excluded from the project. However, the microfilms of the medieval manuscripts from the chapter house of Monza were included. So they must have been at the Ambrosiana at the time, and they added them on. Additionally, some 50,000 manuscript miniatures and illuminated initials were photographed, along with the collections of master drawings and paintings held by the Ambrosiana. Astrid Gabriel obtained various grants to keep the project going, including a National Science Foundation grant to acquire microfilms of the Ambrosiana's medieval scientific manuscripts. Indeed, the NSF grant led Gabriel to publish his summary catalog of 1,000 scientific manuscripts in the Biblioteca Ambrosiana in 1968. Gabriel also worked with two trustees of the Crest Foundation to fund the photography of the miniatures, drawings, and paintings. Frank Folsom, the president of RCA, was a trustee of the Crest Foundation through 1970, and also a member of Notre Dame's Advisory Council for the Sciences. While Mary Davis was the executive vice president of the Crest Foundation from 1972 through 1981. Gabriel named the microfilm collection for Frank Olson and the drawings collection for Mary Davis. In the spring of 1975, as the acquisition of the Ambrosiana materials was concluding, Gabriel used press funds to mount an exhibit at the Sears Bank and Trust Company in the Sears Tower in Chicago, consisting of enlarged photographic posters of selected Ambrosiana manuscript miniatures. Many of them used to be around the rooms here, and I suspect there's probably still a few that are here from that exhibit. This was to be Gabriel's final project as director of the Medieval Institute. Father Hesburgh strictly enforced a rule that faculty retire at age 65. But Gabriel had been allowed a dispensation to remain in his position until the Ambrosiana project concluded in the spring of 1975, when he was 67. I first arrived at Notre Dame in the summer of 1975, soon after the Ambrosiana acquisition was completed, and at the same time as the new Medieval Institute director, Jeffrey Russell, was arriving from Riverside, California for the fall semester. Gabriel moved to a newly renovated office on the 7th floor. He had been this was the director's office at that time. And he moved into a newly renovated office on the 7th floor, which is now the seminar room, 715J. From this office, he continued to supervise the Ambrosiana collection while Russell was busy revising the Medieval Institute graduate program. I was assigned to be the student assistant for Gabriel, and that was some kind of a job at the time. And was put to work cataloging 300 additional scientific manuscripts Gabriel had identified in the Ambrosiana, clearly intended to be an addenda to his 1968 volume. At this time, Gabriel started the bibliographic card file of printed references to Ambrosiana manuscripts by Shelfmark. This finding aid continued to be kept up to date for 20 years until 1995. In the spring of 1976, Gabriel had a falling out with Jeffrey Russell. And that summer, Gabriel departed Notre Dame for PIMS, for the Pontifical Institute of Medieval Studies, some of you may recall. For completely different reasons, Jeffrey Russell soon decided to return to California. He just couldn't stay in South Bend. That was all it was. And he announced he would be leaving Notre Dame in the spring of 1977. During the 1977-78 academic year, there was a search for a new director of the Institute, with Bob Burns, an historian of modern Ireland and Associate Dean of Arts and Letters, appointed as the interim director of the Medieval Institute. Burns saw the potential grant opportunity in the Ambrosiana materials. He worked with the curator of the Medieval Institute Library, Carl Burkhardt, to apply to the Mellon Foundation for a $227,000 grant toward the cost of preparing a descriptive catalog of the Latin and Western vernacular manuscripts in the Ambrosiana. The grant was awarded on March 29, 1978. Carl Burkhardt was a recent Notre Dame PhD in Old English, a student of Lou Nicholson. And within a few months of the awarding of the grant, he actually departed Notre Dame to take an Old English tradition at the University of Dallas. And some of you may recall John Somerville was the president at Dallas at that time. Soon thereafter, John Somerville had been the Western Michigan Kalamazoo. Soon thereafter, during the summer, Bob Burns returned to the dean's office. In August of 1978, the Thomist philosopher Ralph McInerney became the newly appointed director of the Medieval Institute. With the Mellon grant in hand, he applied for an NEH matching grant for the cataloging project, which was awarded on April 1st, 1979. With two grants, Ralph who had great respect for Gabriel, asked him to return to Notre Dame, which Gabriel did in the summer of 1979. I guess realizing there were two big grants on the table helped him come back. At this point, I was completing my dissertation under Bernie McGinn. I had studied Boethius and Thomas under Ralph and had worked closely with Gabriel and the Ambrosiana. So I was invited to be a member of the Ambrosiana cataloging team, along with a recent PhD from Oxford, Elizabeth McIntyre, under the direction of Christine Ader, who had taken her degree under Bernard Bischoff. The three of us spent the summer in Germany working with Professor Bischoff on the finer points of paleography and manuscript description. In the fall of 1979, the Medieval Institute library job opened up because Carl had left, and I took that position, leaving the cataloging project. And another cataloger was hired, Donald Yates, who had been at the Hill Monastic Manuscript Library. I know they call it the Hill Museum and Manuscript Library, but that just doesn't sound right to me after all these years. At St. John's University Collegeville, Minnesota. And I guess, Peter, you took that job when he left.
Yeah, I was his successor at the Hill.
Small world, right.
Yeah. It is a small world.
Yeah. During the initial year of the project, it was somewhat disorganized, and both Christine and Elizabeth left to pursue other interests. Ralph then hired 3 other catalogers onto the project. Liz Lott, a classicist, Thomas Bickey, an expert in canon law, and Art Fields, who specialized in Florentine humanism, with Don Yates heading the group. They worked from 1980 through 1982, independently cataloging various manuscripts in their field of expertise located throughout the Superior Shelf Mark series. Superior meaning superiority manuscript. Liz Lott and Art Fields left in 1982, and in 1983, Thomas Bickey and then Don Yates departed. They had not been able to complete any one shelf-mark unit, and consequently, they had nothing ready for publication at the end of 1983. I shall come back to this project later, but I'm trying to stay chronologically. Meanwhile, Franklin Murphy, the chairman of the board of the Crest Foundation, was invited to Notre Dame in the, I guess it was the winter of the 80-81 academic year, at the invitation of Astrid Gabriel. Gabriel was hoping to get a grant to inventory the 50,000 photographs of medieval miniatures and illuminated initials. But Mr. Murphy favored the Ambrosiana's drawing collection and asked that we submit a proposal to the Crest Foundation to make a catalog of the Ambrosiana drawings. Ralph and I worked on a proposal that was soon submitted and approved for funding. When the chairman says that he wants that, it's pretty easy to get the grant. In the fall of 1981, I checked each photograph in our drawings file against a 3-volume hand list of Ambrosiana drawings produced a few years earlier by Ambrosiana staff member Pietro Nurki. It's a handwritten list. And I made a note of each drawing in Nurki's list that was not represented in our photo collection. I then went to the Ambrosiana, where I first met Giulio Bora, a young art history professor from Italy, who was working with a drawings collection and acted as the unofficial curator. Giulio spent his entire career working with the Ambrosiana materials, as Randy did as well. Angelo Peretti assigned Pietro Nurki to assist me in checking for the missing items. In most cases, the missing items were drawings on the verso of sheets, and thus had been overlooked in the initial photography when they just did the front one after the other. I ordered the negatives and photos of all the missing items so that we would have a fairly complete collection when the cataloging project started. During this trip, Peretti suggested to me that in conjunction with the cataloging project, we plan an exhibition of Ambrosiana drawings for Tour America. When I returned to Notre Dame, I mentioned the possibility to Ralph McIntyre, and he suggested that I talk with the Crest Foundation to make an exhibition part of the funded project. Marilyn Perry, who replaced Franklin Murphy as president of the Crest Foundation in '81, officially it was '84, but she took over really in '81, supported the plan and was instrumental in making initial contacts with museums that might potentially partner in the exhibition. Meanwhile, Later that fall, we hired Randy Coleman, a specialist in Piedmont of the Lombard Renaissance drawings, as the head of the project, for the drawings project. Randy arrived in January 1982 and immediately got to work ordering numerous reference works and drawings catalogs needed for the project. We didn't have too many at the time, and Randy spent several months, and I worked with him, buying hundreds and hundreds of catalogs. So and we kept the collection up, so it's a real good collection now. I worked with Randy to create a digital cataloging schema with fields similar to those used in OCLC book cataloging, along with the creation of a name and subject authority files to ensure consistency in the descriptions and thus more complete search results. I bet you didn't realize we were using OCLC.
I didn't have no idea.
100 to, 250,
Yeah.
500 fields, right. Jim Wilmes, a name from the past, was hired as our outside computer consultant to set up the fields and ensure we had an expandable and fully searchable database. In 1982, this was one of the earliest digital cataloging projects for a major drawings collection. While Randy started in earnest on the massive cataloging project, I focused my attention on the drawings exhibition. We lined up the National Gallery of Art at the museum at Notre Dame, which was at that time called the Snite Museum of Art, the Los Angeles County Museum, the Cleveland Museum of Art, and the Kimball Art Museum in Fort Worth, so it went all around the country. Soon thereafter, we applied for and were awarded an NEA grant, indemnification grant, covering the cost of insuring the drawings while they were on loan. That was a $1 million indemnification grant. Randy worked closely with Giulio Bora and Diane DeGrazia, the drawings curator at the National Gallery in Washington, D.C., who was from Valparaiso, Indiana, believe it or not, to select the drawings for the exhibit and to write the catalog. I worked closely with Angelo Paredi to get permission for the loan from the Italian Ministry of Culture, in particular from the Superintendent of Culture in Lombardy, Carlo Bertelli, who was the director of the Brera Museum. I remember having to go in and meet with him and spend a couple of hours telling him why we needed the drawings and what we were going to do, and how nice it was to have them. And then I had to go down to Rome and talk to various officials in the, both in the American Embassy and in the Cultural Affairs Department in Rome. And then also to cover all our bases, I talked to Pier Giuseppe Bosetti, the Cultural Affairs Officer at the Italian Embassy in Washington. Finally, before the drawings left Milan, we paid for restoration work and new frames for each of the exhibit drawings. We had originally asked for 110 drawings, and as it went through each different group, a few drawings were cut off. We ended up with 89 drawings that were given permission to come. And as Randy reminded me yesterday, at the last minute, 2 drawings were in fact taken out for preservation reasons, as they were actually doing the preservation work. It was very, very funny, but the drawings that they took out were mostly Italian drawings, and we had asked for some Leonardo da Vinci drawings. They were postage stamp size, 2 inches by 2 inches, and they really didn't want to let many of the little Da Vinci drawings out. But they let out almost all of their original Dürer drawings, including his original drawing for The Night Death and the Devil. Nobody cared. So that's the way it went. I remember somebody from Yale wrote to me and said, well, wasn't it so nice that you had so many German drawings and not just Italian? Well, of course, they were letting them out. Randy continued to work on cataloging the Ambrosiana drawings for his entire career, completing the project, around 2020, somewhere around then, 2018?
I don't know.
Yeah, it's never ended, but the first, all right, was about that. And in the process became one of the foremost authorities on Lombard drawings, and has been recognized for that worldwide. One of the last points I want to mention about the Crest Foundation president, Marilyn Perry, she was an avid reader of mysteries, and she connected Ralph McInerney with a Hollywood producer which ultimately resulted into the television series The Father Dowling Mysteries, based on Ralph's novels, which ran from 1989 to 1991 and turned out to be very lucrative for Ralph. They sold his house, he bought a new house, got a couple of cars, and then when he went to, every summer when he was going to write a new novel, instead of doing it at home, he rented a place in Sicily or somewhere else to do that. So. To return to the manuscript cataloging project, by the end of 1983, the manuscript cataloging had departed, leaving several scattered and partial manuscript descriptions that were typed on paper, but nothing in a publishable form. They were still using selectric typewriters and had a person doing it. Ralph asked if I would take on this project, in addition to my duties as librarian, offering to hire someone to assist me with the cataloging, as well as hiring Marina Smith in a staff position to assist with the library duties. He explained that he needed something publishable within a year. I accepted the challenge, and Ralph hired Susan Wall, a recent PhD in medieval French literature, with some manuscript experience. Rather than using typewriters like the earlier catalogers, we switched to an electronic format. Susan and I completed summary descriptions of the Latin and Western vernacular manuscripts in A and B Superior series within a year. I spent a week at the Ambrosiana checking the descriptions against the original manuscripts, and Angelo Paredi allowed me the opportunity of working in the manuscript vault area, so I was able to retrieve manuscripts on my own as needed and work one after the other very efficiently. With the work, once the work was completed and proofed on the computer, the final text was printed using a laser printer. Back in 1984, the only laser printer at the university was at OIT. So I had to go to the OIT office in the evenings when the machine was available and print out a full text for the press. We also had Jim Wilmus create a program to automatically create an index. Switching to a digital format saved a significant amount of time in typesetting, proofing, and indexing. It was the only way we could get a volume out in the allotted time frame. The second volume, covering the manuscripts in C and D Superior, was completed in 1986. And it was dedicated to Angelo Paredi upon his retirement as prefect of Ambrosiana. In that year, Don Cesare Passini became a doctor of Ambrosiana. Cesare is an expert in Greek manuscripts and assumed the role as manuscripts curator. From that point on, Cesare greatly helped us and always expedited our requests for photos and films. Angelo Paredi remained at the Ambrosiana, living in an apartment, I think was on the 3rd floor, during his retirement. And I continued to visit him when I was at the Ambrosiana, but I worked more closely with Cesare from that point on. In 1985, John Van Ingen was appointed director of the Medieval Institute. As he came on the scene, the funding for Susan Wool's position ran out, and she left the project. I then worked on the East Superior manuscripts alone, with that volume being published in 1989. In 1989, Gianfranco Ravasi was appointed prefect of the Ambrosiana. He directed a major building renovation that closed the entire Ambrosiana to the public for about a decade. During that time, the Notre Dame copies were the only materials scholars could consult. So we had a booming business with both on-site visitors and mail requests for microfilms. And that's when you came from, Mr. Arnett. At this point, I had started cataloging the F Superior manuscripts, but realized I would not be able to publish the volume for some time because I could not check the manuscripts due to the library's closure. The manuscripts, I think, were taken out of the library and sent to Switzerland in a vault at that time. So they just weren't available. I mean, nobody could get to them. I discussed the situation with John Van Ingen, who suggested I turn my attention to a shorter but related project. So I proposed creating a catalog of the dated manuscripts of the Ambrosiana. I wrote to Passini in Milan, who thought this was a good plan. The new prefect of the Ambrosiana, Gianfranco Ravasi, was both an academic and a religious celebrity in Milan, and I mean celebrity, giving numerous lectures and regularly appearing on television. He was often out of the library. So in 1995, Pacini was made vice prefect and basically ran the day-to-day operations of the Ambrosiana until he accepted his position as prefect of the Vatican Library in 2007. And I'm happy to say, now that he's retired from the Vatican, he's back home in the Ambrosiana. Also during this period, in 1997, Angelo Paredi passed away. Throughout the late 90s and into the turn of the millennium, there was far less contact between the Medieval Institute and the Ambrosiana. In the mid-90s, I transferred from the Medieval Institute Library to be Director of Special Collections, and Marina Smith took over the MI Library position. Also, Randy Coleman moved to the Art History Department in the 90s, but continued to work on the Ambrosiana project, drawings project, as time permitted. In 1998, John Van Ingen stepped down from the MI directorship, and Pat Geary became the director for 1999-2000 academic year, and then departed the university, so quick turnover. He was followed as director of the MI by Tom Noble. Tom tried to work with the Ambrosiana. At one point, Tom arranged a meeting with Ravasi, so Tom and I traveled to Milan. However, Ravasi was apparently out of town on the day of our scheduled meeting. So instead, we met with Cesare Pacini, who profusely apologized and graciously showed us around the newly renovated building. Tom's only other Ambrosiana-related event occurred a few years later when Tom needed to find an office for John Van Ingen on the 6th floor. It was part of the 6th floor that the Medieval Institute has. He decided to clear the 6th floor room where the positive microfilms were held and give John an office in a room that was behind that room. Tom asked the prefect of the Vatican Library, Cardinal Farina, if they wanted the Ambrosiana positive microfilms. When Farina said that they were interested, Tom shipped the entire 12,000 positive microfilms to the Vatican, with Notre Dame continuing to retain the original negative microfilms. The situation with the Ambrosiana changed dramatically in 2007 when Ravasi moved to Rome to become a cardinal, and Franco Buzzi was appointed the Ambrosiana prefect. At that time, there were several new appointments. Francesco Bracci became a doctore at that point. Federico Gallo entered the picture, and Alberto Rocca also came in. And eventually, Bracci became the vice prefect, Federico the head of the library, and Rocca the director of the Biblioteca. All three came to Notre Dame during Remy Constable's tenure as MI director between 2009 and 2014 to rekindle the cooperative programs that we had previously undertaken. It was during this era that some classes, including Martin Blumer's class that was mentioned earlier, from Notre Dame visited the Ambrosiana. But it was not until the Ambrosiana and the Cattolica started on the digitization initiatives that we found a significant new project of mutual interest that has already been discussed in the past. I'd like to conclude this talk with a few suggestions based on my past experience how Notre Dame might consider developing the Ambrosiana ND collection for the future. And Tom had asked me to end with a few comments. Clearly, this collaboration needs to have institutional backing. That institutional backing was fully understood throughout the university during the Hesburgh years. And Ted Hesburgh told the story 100 times a year, over and over again, and there was nobody on campus that hadn't heard the Ambrosiana story about him and the building and all that. And so it was quite well known. But during the Malloy and Jenkins administrations, there was less understanding of this relationship, particularly as Hesburgh-era faculty and staff retired and new replacements were hired. To remedy this situation, the university administration at the provost level needs to determine if a relationship with both the Ambrosiana, Italy's foremost Catholic library, that's as opposed to the Vatican, and with the equally renowned La Cattolica are in alignment with the goals and values of Notre Dame and should be pursued. If so, this needs to be expressed in a way that the current and future deans, particularly the deans of arts and letters and the library, are aware of this special relationship. Additionally, several units in the university should feel they can assist in forwarding this goal. The Medieval Institute has a central role in the relationship, particularly in the realm of lectureships, academic exchanges, and conferences. But other units in arts and letters should be contacted to participate at various junctures, such as the Italian Studies Program, Art History, or the Museum, and possibly even the Notre Dame Rome Program, and many others, of course, possible. But since the Ambrosiana is indeed a library, the Biblioteca Ambrosiana, the Hesburgh Library, in my view, needs to be centrally involved in the relationship. The ongoing appointment of library faculty and staff allow for the stability needed for long-term agreements and implementation of ongoing collection-related projects. The continual turnover of grant-funded positions can be useful to supplement project output, but direction and ownership of projects needs to be institutional. And even among the Institute, the directors change, and there's always a lot of changes. So the library really has a continuous relationship possibilities. As we move further into the digital age, this relationship between the two libraries is more important than ever. Hesburgh Library expertise in digital humanities, database maintenance, digital preservation, and rare book and manuscript cataloging can play critical roles in the current and future projects. Further, there needs to be someone in the library responsible for coordinating the ongoing relationship with the Ambrosiana, as well as ensuring we continue to retain high-level academic librarians in the relevant fields who can work closely with the Medieval Institute and other faculty and units on campus regarding potential Ambrosiana projects that support Notre Dame's teaching and research goals. I know that's a mouthful, but
Yeah.
I hope these few comments on the past 65 years were informative, and that we can move forward to strengthen our mutual beneficial relationship with the Ambrosiana for the next 65 years and beyond. Thanks.
We have time for a few questions or comments, so I'll let you field.
Okay. It was all perfectly clear, so. Oh, okay, Ken?
I was here from 1985 and paid close attention to the Ambrosiana. If you remember, you and John and I got a grant from California
Yes.
for the
I
Ambrosiana
know.
to do something,
Yeah, I know.
which didn't go very far, but okay. Now, I was shocked by one of the things you said, because I never heard of it, and that was the moving of the positive manuscripts to the Vatican.
Yeah.
That seemed to me a rather radical decision,
Yeah, that
which was not public knowledge, but I mean,
No.
that's okay. But
Yeah.
it's a radical decision, and I mean, didn't it require all kinds of coordination with the Ambrosiana and so on, or was that just a Notre Dame thing that we could do?
Tom was doing that at that time. I was in special collections, and so I didn't know about it either at that moment. But I suspect he did talk to the Ambrosiana. Subsequent to that, soon after that, if he talked to the Ambrosiana, he probably would have talked to Pacini, and then Pacini became head of the Vatican.
Yeah.
And
So, in terms of users, because I remember the period when the Ambrosiana was closed,
Yeah.
and so many people, when they were writing me and others, and were getting microfilms
Right.
from Notre Dame and the Ambrosiana. It
Oh,
was
yeah.
really quite a land office business.
It was huge, right.
But had they been accustomed to receiving negatives or positives? Did anybody notice that this?
We used the negatives to make a positive copy. And so,
Okay.
So we.
So the users would not, the users from outside would not have noticed
No, there would be no difference.
that the positive gone. But if anybody came here and would have preferred the positives,
We could make a positive.
Yeah,
but-
for them.
Right, you could make a positive, and that's what we did, but,
so that minimized considerably the effect of
yeah.
losing
Well, you
those
had the
films.
room next to where the manuscripts were, the
Yeah.
positive microfilms were. Yeah, and.
I didn't know that.
At one
I
point
didn't
it
know
was-
that that space had been.
Yeah, when you had the journal, the
That's
big
right,
room
that's
beside
right.
it.
No, that's
And
right.
John was in back.
And we had the rest of that room for the addition, but I'm just saying, I
Right.
didn't even know that that space had been, because the Ambrosiana was also parked up here.
Negatives, yeah, the negatives were up here.
So the positives were down there.
Yes, yeah.
So in terms of the actual operation of the Medieval Institute vis-à-vis the Ambrosiana microfilms, in the end, that which I would consider a dramatic move didn't have that much of an effect.
No, I guess not, but there it is. Yeah.
When did, well, you've now written, this is the first time I've ever heard of this in your speech.
Ah.
When did you discover this?
At the time, yeah, I knew about it. I didn't know about it immediately, but I knew, when I talked to Tom, he had done it, and I don't think he was probably trying to make it well-known beforehand, but after it was done, he certainly, let people know.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I think, did you have a hand up back there, Dr. Julia?
I did.
Oh, Julie! Okay.
So Lou, this is a like crucial moment kind of question. When you started here as a graduate student,
Right.
the Ambrosiana project was already ongoing. When you became a part of it, did you realize, of course, Father Hesburgh was going around telling everybody what a great thing it was, but did you really realize that this was something that could be ongoing like this long? And in
This
the
long?
future? Yeah.
No. I didn't realize it, to be truthful. And I think it only, the Ambrosiana projects continued to go on really because of personal commitments, I think, most often. I mean, in many ways, it was my commitment, and I wanted to stay here particularly to continue that. And Randy the same. Randy the same. And so if Randy had left or I had left, it probably would have been a different story. To just be honest.
So to follow up on that, how much of that was about the project and how much of it was about the people?
How much of what?
Like how much of your investment in the whole thing, in the Ambrosiana project, wanting to stay, wanting to see it through? I'm looking for a question about continuity over time.
Yeah.
Like, did you feel
Well-
responsible for it, I guess is the best way to put it.
I guess you feel responsible in a way. You know the people at the Ambrosiana. You become invested. I think that's probably the way to put it at a certain point in time. And, you just become known for that. And various things happen. Because I was doing all this, I became a member of the CIPL, and Randy became a member of a variety of things because of what he did. And it's just one of those things that grows on time, and then you look around and 40 years has passed. So, okay, good. So we'll wait and then hear Randy's comments.
Join me in thanking Dr. Lewis.